Hello and welcome to the Osceola's Reeling Them In, where we talk all things FSU football recruiting. My name is Pat Burnham, and I am joined by the man, the myth, the legend himself, Charles Fishbein, and a man we're trying to turn into a recruiting legend, Nick Carlisle.
I was about to say, when do I become the? I know Fish has got plenty of years on me, but I need to get me into a title like recruiting legend.
We're recruiting legend in the making. That's what I just
there
said.
We go.
That's what I just said.
Relax, grasshopper. Come on, man.
I got it. I know. We got a couple of years to go.
Yeah, you got a lot of years to catch up.
You got a lot of years to go.
We'll be gone by the time you get caught up with us.
Oh, jeez.
All right. Well, listen. We're glad to have Fish back. It probably has not been that long ago since we saw Fish. But it seems like that long because we've been in camp a week. These are very busy days. It's been 7 straight days of either football practice or football camps for high school kids at Florida State, and a lot of stuff to talk about. Fish released his latest edition of Baker's Dozen. We had elite camp on Saturday. We had some high-profile visitors at Florida State on Sunday. We got some commitments coming up, including Josh Petty and Khalid Lockett sometime in the middle of August. I think maybe August 13th or 9th for Khalid. I'll have to go back and look at that. But a lot of things going on, guys. Exciting time. High school football has started practice in the state of Florida and most other states. So probably lesser recruiting news over the course of the next 30 days until kids are able to go back on campus. And obviously coaches can start going out and watching games on Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturday afternoons, I guess, in Miami. But yeah, a lot going on, Fish. Glad to have you. How are things in South Florida?
Doing good, just very hot.
Yeah, well, hey. Yeah. Nick and I are used to that. We've been out at practice 7 days in grueling heat. And, of course, I'm lucky as an old guy. I get to go get IPF duty, so I'm in and out. And then, of course, now it was a steamer on Saturday at the camp. But yeah, Nick and I have probably seen too much of each other. I think he's probably going to opt out of one of these at some point. But all right, Fish. So a lot going on, and we have a lot of information that kind of crosses over between what we were doing this weekend and your Baker's Dozen. So I want to start there because the first name on your Baker's Dozen list is a guy that was on campus this past weekend and has a commitment date coming up on August 12th, and that's offensive tackle Josh Petty from Fellowship Christian School in or around the Atlanta area. He visited Georgia Tech on Saturday, Florida State on Sunday. I'm gonna get both your thoughts. Nick talked to him and wrote an article on him. But just Fish? What is your latest update on what you think is going to happen with Josh Petty?
Yeah, I still feel good about FSU and Petty. Their chances with him. You get this always a marathon. I know there's always other networks or people out there that'll throw something out to give people some red meat, and FSU fans are probably the most nervous Nellies they're out there. But I still like where FSU sits with Petty. He's a position of need. They've put a lot of time and resources into landing him, and I think that they have a legit shot at pulling him in, and they probably will.
Yeah, and you and I always talk about don't show me what you say, show me what you do. And of course, this is a kid who, and Nick, this question goes to you. When you and I were talking after you interviewed him, I have not, and to be honest with you, I have not read your article. I trust your work, so I think I saw enough from this weekend to kind of have an understanding of what's going on. He lists 5 finalists, but he was at Georgia Tech on Saturday. He was at Florida State on Sunday. Don't you believe that this is a battle like Fish thinks between Georgia Tech and Florida State?
Yeah, you'd have to believe that's the case. I mean, you want to give the I guess the political answer and say that everybody's still in the running here. But you go to Georgia Tech and Florida State in back-to-back days. You have to think that it's coming down between those two schools. I didn't ask him necessarily about Georgia Tech when I talked to him. That's something I probably wish that I did when I had the opportunity. But that you'd have to believe that it's those two schools. I can't see another school coming back into this at this time.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think I think there's a reason the kid visited who he visited last, being Georgia Tech and Florida State. And I do think, now listen, Fish, I know that you think Georgia Tech's making a hard push for Josh. Obviously, with Florida State's needed offensive tackle, you would think he would, he's definitely a priority for Florida State too. I think most people would just naturally assume that this is Florida State's the lead. How close is Georgia Tech in pursuit of Petty compared to Florida State? Do you think it's a 50-50 deal? Do you think it's a 75-25 Florida State?
I think FSU's over 50% in this. I just have to believe that these guys, what they've put into him, recruiting him, his sister being, also involved in the recruitment as far as her going. I believe she's in Tallahassee now. So I just think everything points to Florida State. These things have gone sideways before, but I feel pretty confident in saying that Florida State will land Petty.
Yeah, and I believe that at least you and I have future cast in for Petty to Florida State. I don't plan on changing mine unless I'm to hear something just that's totally different from people in the Atlanta area that follow Georgia Tech recruiting. What about you, Nick? You lean Florida State or Georgia Tech with Petty at this point?
Yeah, I have to lean Florida State here, Pat. I mean, it's good that you get him back on campus, but I asked the kid, how far away is he actually from Florida State? It's about a 5-hour drive, and I know it makes it easier when you're in the Atlanta area. It cuts down that drive a little bit more. But the fact that you go to Georgia Tech, which is closer, and then extend that, come back to Florida State for another look as well before heading on back. I think the fact that he came back again and he said that he wanted to get a special feeling again, that same feeling that he felt on his official visit, and he said he felt that again. Who knows? He could have said similar things about Georgia Tech, but you have to feel good again about where Florida State is with him on that.
Yeah, I agree with you. And you're right. You did make a good point, Nick. Sometimes we got to remember they're talking to us, right? They know that we're associated with Florida State because we're outside the practice facility there. And we've seen some of that happen in the past where not talking about Josh, but other kids where we felt like after we saw them talk to another school after a visit to Florida State and a visit to that school, they said similar things about both schools, right? I think they're to some extent they're talking to their audience. That's why I'm always a bigger fan of us in the recruiting industry asking open-ended questions as opposed to leading questions. And you do see a lot of leading questions when we talk to these kids. I've asked leading questions before when I had I'm not saying that I'm innocent of that by any stretch, but I think you get better answers when you ask open-ended questions. And I know we try to do a good job of that. And listen, again, kids are going to speak to their audience. We all do to a certain extent. It's just human nature. So just like we're talking to our audience now. But anyway, all right. So Fish, the next two guys, I go back and forth, man. The two running backs at Florida State's probably the top two on their board. I think it's safe to say Osceola Cromah and Byron Lewis. I'll be honest with you. I put in a future. I know there's a lot of smoke about Byron Lewis and Miami. I put in a future cast for Byron Lewis in Florida State last week. Listen, he's a kid that's high on Florida State. And then obviously I think Cromah it's a 3-team race, FSU, Georgia. And listen, the way Auburn's recruiting right now, I mean, I think they're a legitimate threat. I heard last night that they're getting ready to flip Juju Lewis from USC to Auburn. So they've got some heat right now on the recruiting trail. But just give me what you think about both those kids, where they are in their recruiting process right now.
I feel, Cromah, it's he had this, he liked Florida State, didn't like them. I like where they're sitting with him again. We say follow the visits. He's been on a ton of visits. I think Cromah is a kid that likes Florida State, but it's always difficult to turn down, Georgia when you're in the position they are. I think they will have a legit shot at getting him, but I don't have a great feel yet where I'm gonna go put a future cast in on Cromah on Florida State, but I do think they have a legitimate shot.
Yeah, and now he was on campus late last week, or either Friday or Saturday. I did find that out, and then I talked with someone that said that they thought he had his most enjoyable time around the coaching staff. So that's a good sign with Osman. Obviously, hell of a player. And listen, I think it's going to be a tight battle between all three of those. How do you see Fish? Do you think there's a timeline for him? Do you think, or this is going to play out all the way through National Signing Day?
I think I've seen some stuff where he said he's going to decide in August at some point. So it'll be interesting to see where that goes.
Yeah, it will be. But listen, I think you get one of those two, you're happy, right?
No question.
Now, what do you think about Lewis? Now, like I said, there's a couple of future casts in for Lewis to Miami. Obviously, that's closer to home, but he's been on campus here at Florida State a lot. Has had very positive things to say. Now, listen, they're going to say positive things about everywhere they go. But what do you think about their chances with Lewis?
Yeah, I think Lewis is going to end up in FSU's class. Just the ties to Coach Surtain, the relationships they've built. He's been on Florida State's campus multiple times. I think he's a priority to the Florida State campus. Coaches. I think Lewis is one of those kids that if there's a better shot at them landing Lewis and Chroma, I believe, than getting neither. Just because I think Lewis is pretty much in the class. I think he's going to be in their class. And I think Chroma is one of those guys that if he decides to commit in August, then they'll get both of them. But I really think Florida State sits in a good spot with Lewis.
Yeah, I do too. And that's why I put in the future cast for Lewis, Florida State. We'll see if I can keep my I don't know if I'm on a positive streak or a negative streak. I can't remember the last future cast I put in, who it was before Lewis. But anyway, all right, so Ty Jackson was number 4 on your list. The linebacker from Seminole Ridge. And I want to hear what you have to say about it because I got an interesting text last night on Ty Jackson maybe getting ready to pull the trigger with an SEC school as far as the commitment is concerned.
Yeah, I mean, they've never really gotten a ton of traction, but I have heard that he's a huge FSU fan. His family likes Florida State. There's people that are outside of the program that have tried to push Florida State on him. So, but he just hasn't taken a lot of visits. I don't think he's taken a lot of visits to many of these schools. So it's his.
It was only about 3.
Yeah, his recruitment's very odd. It's a position of need. I don't know. I just don't feel like Florida State's pushed all that hard, but I do think he's a very important piece to their recruiting class. So.
Yeah. Nick, have you heard anything on Jackson? I heard last night that from a buddy of mine that's very knowledgeable in the ways of recruiting and a trusted source who believes he's going to commit to the Gators. Have you heard anything like that?
I haven't heard anything like that, but I would trust your guy. I believe Florida was one of 2 schools, maybe that, because I had heard from one of our rivals guys that he had gotten injured at some point, either in a summer workout or during the spring, and that prevented him from going and seeing some of his later official visits. And Florida State was one of those. I think he had it slotted for the 14th. I don't know if that's entirely accurate, but that's potentially in the cards there. And they rerouted or reset his official visit for November, I believe. I think Florida was one of the schools that was able to get in. And whether that official visit to Florida State was canceled on his side or Florida State's side because they felt better about somebody else, I don't know.
Right.
It would not surprise me if he pulled the trigger for the Gators. Because I believe that was I think he went there on the 31st of May.
That is correct. He was there.
So, I mean, if that's the smoke that you heard, I would be inclined to believe it. And I just feel the same as Fish. It was kind of one of those weird commitments. They seemed to back off on him in pursuit of other prospects. And obviously now we know that there was a bit of a gutter ball in the linebacker recruiting. So they're trying to come back on him a little bit late. It might be a little bit too late.
Yeah, I mean, you guys know my feeling. Any kid that commits to Florida, if the kid decides to commit to Florida, that's an open recruitment. They'll still get him back on campus at some point. So.
Yeah, I think some of that's true, Fish. Listen, I've always said that winning is the biggest draw you have in recruiting, but the NIL has made that a little bit more complicated for multiple reasons. But we can talk about that, and we've talked about that a little before. I'm not gonna. We don't have to have that debate again or the conversation again. That's really not. I just think it's got a little bit more. It's dirtied the water, and that's a bad term, but it's muddied the water a little bit as far as people picking schools solely because that's where they want to go over the other schools. All right, so the next 2 guys on your list are 2 DBs, Onis Conan Banny from Heathwood Hall. It's down to Tennessee and FSU for him. And then you got Bryce Fitzgerald, who looks like it's FSU, Miami, and UF. Fish, what are you thinking? What do you think is going to happen with Onus when he commits? You think it's going to be Florida State or Tennessee, or you still kind of trying to figure out and decipher all that?
No, I think he's leaning to Tennessee. I think Florida State's made a good run at him. I just don't know if it's enough to overcome his recruitment. I do think Fitzgerald, Florida State has a better shot of the two. I think they have a better shot at Fitzgerald just because he really seemed to enjoy his visit to Florida State. They went from not being on the radar to being on his radar. I think Florida State has a legitimate shot more at Fitzgerald than Onus. So watch Onus commit to Florida State and Fitzgerald go somewhere else now. So
yeah. Well, it's the way recruiting works, right? It's very, very inexact science, as we learned with C.J. Wiley not too long ago, sitting in Jacksonville, Florida. So everybody with rivals, thought he was committing to either mostly Georgia, but some LSU, but nobody thought he was coming to Florida State. And he committed to Florida State, was back on campus this weekend. We'll talk a little bit about that later. All right, so number 7 was Tavion Wallace. I'll cover that for all of us. We all think there's a chance Florida State may end up getting back on him, particularly if Sam Pittman and Arkansas were to get off to a sluggish start, and there could be a staff change there if that were to happen. Number 8 was Jared Smith. He's got FSU's in it, obviously, along with Auburn, Ole Miss. I believe South Carolina was involved at one point. I think this is more of a battle between Auburn and Ole Miss. Fish, am I misreading the tea leaves on that?
No, I think he's not going to end up in FSU's class, but this list really isn't as much as who they're going to get list, as much more of who their top targets are and who they need to land. Yep. Jared's a big time prospect. Florida State needs DNs. He's one of the best there is, but it's very difficult for them to pull this kid, especially since Auburn. I think the kid's from Auburn, close to Auburn.
He's from Birmingham. Yeah, he's from the Birmingham area, I believe.
So, I mean, pulling, my feeling on Alabama players, I think they're very hard to pull out of state, especially with Auburn where they're at. And, their head coach, you're going to basically give them NIL. Like that's, Freeze with the NIL's got to be close to almost impossible to beat out for a kid. So.
Yeah, listen, I don't know what the hell they're doing at Auburn right now, but whatever it is, it's working. Old Pastor Hughes getting it done. Pastor Hugh passing it down the pew. That's passing that bucket. Now it's a legal bucket, so he's that lumber money, that Yellowwood money, spending good right now. I'll tell you that. All right, so Khalid Lockett, the wide receiver from Texas. It looks like FSU and probably Texas. Listen, the way Florida State's recruited receivers this year, and Khalik's been on campus multiple times. Like you say, with your Baker's dozen, it could be difficult to get him out of Texas. How would you rate Florida State's chances there, Fish?
With the way they're recruiting wide receivers right now, I would not put it past them to pull this kid off. I mean, they already pulled Wiley. They pulled the kid from South Carolina. I think that they're in a position of where they could go all in on these guys. They don't have to really worry about the wide receiver position now. They've got a very good class going. So you go all in on this, take your chances. I do think Texas will be tough to beat, but Florida State has a shot at landing them.
All right, then you got 3 committed guys that are 10, 11, and 12. TJ Alford, the linebacker for Vero Beach, committed to Ohio State. Jalen Wiggins, the defensive end from Rickards High School here in Tallahassee, committed to Florida. Jeremiah McLeod, the defensive tackle, is committed to Florida. It looks like he's transferred to Lee County High School. Is that right?
Yes.
All right, so he's transferred from Gadsden to Lee County. Maybe that helps him with Osman Cromont. Who knows? I think they're playing at the same high school now. Out of those 3, because we've talked about Jalen a lot, out of those 3, who do you think Florida State's got the best chance to flip?
I think Wiggins, just because he's local, major position of need. I think he's been on campus a few times. He's a one kid of all 3 that I feel if I had to put money on it that on signing day he will sign with Florida State. Alford, He's committed to Ohio State. If they have the season that you're expecting them to have, where they're in the playoffs and make a deep run, do they become difficult to beat? I do know that Alford, there's someone working with him that's also leaning on Florida State. They have an ally in this recruitment and somebody that wants to see him at Florida State, and that will try to push him that way if they have a shot at landing him. I'll just leave it at that.
Friends of the program, you gotta love them.
Yeah.
Friends of the program. Good friends are hard to find. All right, so then the last kid, your Baker's dozen, was a guy we both love on film, Ladarian Clarity from Escambia High School, the safety. I thought for Florida, I think I've got a future in cast for Ladarian Clarity to come to Florida State. I have to go back and check it. I thought this was going to be one of those easier recruitments. He had waited and waited and waited on the Florida State offer, finally got it, but now you've got a team like Ole Miss involved, and Ole Miss is recruiting at a very high level. He certainly seems to like Ole Miss a lot. What are your thoughts on Ladarian as he gets into the start of his senior season, as far as where you think he might end up?
Ole Miss definitely leads. I think Florida State's put a hard push on him. I really like him. I think he's a lot better than his ranking says he is. I mean, just turn on the film. I think he's one of the better defensive backs we've watched. I think he has a versatility to play multiple positions. Florida State's in there. Ole Miss is going to be the leader right now, but you've seen it with some of these guys where Florida State seems to be able to kind of squeeze their way in and land these guys this year more than any other year. I think they've done a very good job of not showing their hand. And it's hard because I think they've kept everything real tight this year, where past years they've let these other schools kind of work against them. But I don't think they've been able to do that this year.
Yeah, it's been interesting for sure. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to take a quick break and hear from one of our sponsors, and we'll be right back to talk elite camp and Sunday visitors at practice. Interesting weekend on campus for Florida State. Multiple offers extended, and a bunch of big names either worked out or showed up for unofficial visits. But we'll be right back in 30 seconds.
Finding an experienced lawyer you can trust is crucial. With over 50 years of combined litigation experience, the attorneys at Mowry Law Firm are dedicated to providing our clients with exceptional legal services, focusing on car and trucking accidents, premises liability, and wrongful death. Call 904-824-7799, MowryLaw.com.
All right, we want to thank old Dan Mowry for being one of the Osceola's Reeling the Men sponsors. Dan was a teammate of mine in high school and obviously a kicker for Florida State for 4 years and a good friend, and we are happy to have him with us. Thank you, Dan, for sponsoring the show. All right, guys, so a busy weekend. Elite camp on Saturday. Listen, it was in a lot of ways, it was a who's who. A lot of people, I'm sure, were glad to see Solomon Thomas on campus. You had CJ Wiley. Now, Solomon was here, did not work out, but was here for, I believe, 3 days. I know he was here multiple days. He was there Saturday and at practice Sunday. CJ Wiley was at camp. Brady Schmeigel was at camp. Tramel Jones was at camp. So you saw some committed kids. Listen, we're not going to spend a lot of time on Solomon. We did write an article on him. And it's on at theosceola.com. You can read all of what he said to me on Saturday, but essentially he said he thought it was important for him to get to town, meet some of these new commitments, and in that regard, he met CJ Wiley and Brady Schmeigel. Got 2 guys he will play with once he gets here. He said he felt like it had been a minute since he'd gotten back on campus, even though he was here in June, but he had not been on campus for a while before that June official visit. But listen, the only thing I will tell you was that he seems like a more relaxed individual since he has put the recruiting to rest and is locked in with Florida State. Was one of the easier conversations I've had with him. Was very personable, so he looks good there. Listen, CJ Wiley, man, it's the first time I'd seen him work out in person. Listen, he is if I had to say, listen, I'm not a big guy that thinks people can come in and play as true freshmen in major college football, or the vast majority of them, but that guy's, listen, Florida State's getting a hell of a prospect. He is a little bit thicker than I thought, particularly lower body. Of course, his dad was a great player at LSU, defensive end named Chuck Wiley. So he's got some good DNA in that regard. But he gets the top end speed fast. He's got great hands. If you're a Florida State fan, I think you've got to be impressed with what you saw. Nick, you got a chance to watch him work out. I believe that's the first time you'd seen him in person. What was your thoughts on what you saw from CJ?
Yeah, it's the combination of size and speed is very real. It's not something that, I mean, you could recognize it on film, but until you understand it and see it in person, and he wasn't going against, total scrubs at this elite camp. I mean, there were good defensive backs at this camp. And there was one rep where he just basically ran a go route, and again, the size and speed combination, he beat him by a good few strides. I can't remember who exactly the defensive back was, but yeah, if Florida State can hold on to CJ Wiley, this is probably one of the best wide receiver prospects that they've had come in out of high school in a while.
Yeah, and I think probably one of the more excited people to see CJ was Tramel Jones. They spent a vast majority of camp throwing the ball. I think they basically kept CJ in whatever line Tramel was throwing to. I know Brady, I talked to Brady after the camp. He said he got to meet him, got to spend some time around him, but didn't work with him quite as much as Tramel. And listen, listen, I'm not going to sit here and say they had great chemistry or anything like that on the field. They haven't worked with each other enough. But I will say this, and Nick, you've seen Tramel now twice. I think, to me, Fish, I know you and I have talked about this. I think Tramel is getting stronger, and I think he's throwing the ball with a little bit more velocity, getting the ball out of his hand quicker. Nick, you've seen him in the past. You've seen some of his high school tape. What are your opinions on what you saw from Tramel on Saturday?
Yeah, I thought he looked good. There's definitely been times in the offseason where you could definitely tell that he's still growing in his development. I'm just excited to see him, put on pads and start putting some of this to senior film, because all the offseason work is great, but he's got to be able to put it together in order to, because I mean, you and I and Fish have been talking about his offseason and how well it's gone. Saturday or Sunday was just another day for us to kind of see him grow a little bit into the quarterback that I'm sure we all want him to be.
Yeah, and you're right. As we always say, what matters is what happens when the pads come on. So we will see. We're going to try to get over to one of Tramel's games later this fall, and hopefully be able to see him in person at some point again. And of course, we did see him play live in person in the state championship games back the first full weekend of December. So we have seen him. Brady Schmeigel, listen, he's been a regular. I talked to his father a little bit while they were here. His father's one of his high school coaches. He snuck away to get back to Tallahassee. He said, listen, we love this place. And I think if you're a Florida State fan, you had to be impressed with what we saw from Brady on Saturday. I think he might have had the strongest arm in camp. There were some good quarterbacks in camp from 2026, 2027, and 2028. We'll drop a few names so you can start keeping track of them as we go through this pod and videocast. But listen, the kids, he throws the ball really well. He throws a great deep ball. He can rip it when he needs to. And of course, he can throw a touch. And he's a competitive kid. I asked him why he came to this camp. Flew all the way out just to work out. He said he wanted to work out for. He hadn't got a chance to work out for Mike Norvell. He wanted to get coached by Mike Norvell during this camp. And he said, he felt like that being here, working with Tony Tokars, working with Mike Norvell and the rest of the FSU staff, he felt like it could help him going into his junior year. But listen, his family, he and his family all seem very much at home here. 2 years to go, but certainly a guy that, listen, you have to be impressed with his maturity that he shows every time we talk to him. He handles himself very well. And then he was very open. He goes, he wanted to get down here and he wanted to start competing with Tramel because they will compete. And they've gotten to be, he didn't mean it in an adversarial thing. He meant it in a teammate thing. We're going to be teammates. We've gotten to be because they've gotten to be pretty close over social media, whether it's Instagram, Facebook. I don't know what the kids use today, but I know it's probably not Facebook. I'm probably dated myself with that, but he had it. He enjoyed himself. He is going to try to get back a couple times this year for games at least once. But listen, You saw him again, Nick, the second time you've seen him in the last month. Did you see anything different than you saw in Jacksonville, and what did you think of what you saw?
I just got to focus a little bit more on, seeing him throw to receivers. Myself and his father Joe were standing next to each other while he was throwing in the one-on-ones, and he's got great ball placement. Is what I've picked up in the couple of times that I've seen him. He's got some really nice ball placement, can fit the ball into some tight windows, and I'm excited that. Or Florida State fans should be excited that he's got a lot of those good mental traits that I think Mike Norvell and Tony Tokar's, like that work ethic, that desire to improve and learn, and looking forward to see what he does this season.
Yeah, I think he's going to be fun to watch. And then, of course, we had 4 new offers come out of this camp for Florida State. Probably the biggest name is they offered 2026 strong side defensive end prospect Jordan Carter from Douglas County High School in Douglasville, Georgia. This was an odd one to me for 2 reasons. A, he's rated as a 10th best overall prospect in the class of 2026. The second best strong side defensive end. He's listed at 6'3", 221. His high school listed at 6'3", 235. To be honest with you guys, he did not stick out to me at camp. Now, I did not spend a ton of time watching the defensive ends. I watched a couple reps. Wasn't wowed by any one particular person, so I've moved on. Listen, he's got offers from Alabama, Auburn, Clemson, Florida, and Georgia, just to name a few. I turned on his film, and I don't know whether it was because I've been watching practice for 5 days and then went straight to a camp and try to watch as many as 60 kids. I think he's a solid prospect. When I turned on his huddle highlights, Fish, I'd love at some point if you get a chance to break him down, get your thoughts.
Yeah, I watched him. I have him as of what was called Group of 5 prospect. I didn't have him as a Power 5 prospect. I went back and looked at my notes. I saw a lot of the same things you saw. They get on these kids early sometimes, kind of offer early, so they could get them around them on campus. And I've always said you can't offer enough O-line and D-line. You don't have to take every one of them, but you offer them. You have nothing to lose. Maybe the kid develops over the next year, but I saw a lot of the same things you saw. Yeah,
my big question after watching this film, do they potentially see this kid being the guy that gets big? Listen, he's only going to his junior year, so he's probably going to gain some weight. Is he a guy that can potentially move inside to be a 3 technique? Because I did not see elite get off on his high school tape. He's very productive, plays very hard. And, listen, you can – and maybe he continues to develop, but he was one of the 4 kids they offered coming out of that camp. And, listen, these kids mature. They get better as they get older. There's no way I was anywhere near playing my best football, and none of us are as 10th graders in high school. You got to grow into your body, get stronger. So we'll see. We'll see if he develops that elite quickness off the ball and all those things. But that was one I did not see coming out of this camp. And listen, I trust Florida State's evaluation process, but I was kind of surprised, not surprised that they offered him. Maybe that he was such highly rated going into his junior year based off of what I'd seen. They did offer a 2027 DB, Josh Dobbs, listen, they've been on a hot streak with South Carolina, from Fort Mill, South Carolina. Josh was back on campus on Sunday. He has offers from Virginia Tech, Tennessee, South Carolina, NC State, and Indiana, among others. Now, listen, I didn't get a lot of time to watch him in camp, but I've seen some of his film. He's got very good film. Nick, did you get a chance to see Josh at all?
Yeah, a little bit. I think it's got great burst, especially kind of closing on guys. He's got, I guess you would call that pursuit. I liked what I saw from him initially. I had a hard time believing he was a 2027. I initially thought he was probably 2026. But, in a couple of reps that I saw that after, I kind of took notice of him initially and kind of identified him, he was a great competitor, very intense, even in just the camp setting, and was certainly getting hype with Surtain and the rest of the DBs when he broke up a couple of passes in a row. So it was certainly a well-deserved offer. Obviously, being 2027, you got to see how he develops and, where he goes and just kind of the flavor of how his recruitment proceeds. But initially, the eye test looks pretty good.
Yep. Yeah. And then you got a 2027 offer out to offensive lineman Jalen Hayward from Amity City, Louisiana. It was his first Power 4 offer. So they'll start racking up now. He camped at Ole Miss and LSU this summer. He's listed at 6'7", 263. He's growing into his body fish. I didn't go into an in-depth evaluation because he's going into a sophomore year. He's 6'7", 263. You understand why the measurables are enticing. If you're any school, obviously he showed something to Alex Atkins in camp. And we'll see where that goes moving forward. But he's just now starting to blow up. It'll be interesting to see whether how he develops over the coming. And I don't know, Nick. Okay, so yeah, thanks, Nick. We'll see how that goes as he continues to develop. I was paying attention to some other offensive linemen in camp. They had him separated into two distinct groups, and he was with the younger group, I believe. And so I spent some time with the older group to talk about a guy we're going to talk about here in a second. And then really now this is the guy that shocked me. And I can't believe we're talking about a 2028 prospect. When I saw the kid, I wrote down his number, wrote down some notes, did not know who he was. Listen, just so people that are listening and watching know how this works, they put jerseys numbers on kids. So if we don't recognize them from them being on campus before, we really don't have any idea. So it's really, we're paying attention to the guys that flash in drills, that show something, and not by reputation, not by name, because we don't know who's who unless he's kids we've talked to on a regular basis. But this kid's name is Bryson Wright. He is going to go to Mandarin High School this year as a rising freshman. He's listed as 6'3". He's probably not quite 6'3", but long story short, he doesn't play like a rising freshman. He's a kid that's going to be fun to watch. We're not going to get into the weeds about it. He's also has offers from Miami and Florida. Obviously, there's a long time to go with this kid, but he was very, very impressive in camp, and we'll see where that goes. But those are the four offers coming out of camp. And then, of course, there was a couple offensive linemen I did pay attention to, particularly Darius Gray, probably the most impressive athletically. His feet has spectacular feet. He's a 2026 offensive lineman. Nick, you talked to him after the camp. What were kind of his comments to you, and what were your impressions of Darius?
Yeah, this was a kid that's been trying to visit Florida State at pretty much ever since they offered him in February. He's been around the country in the past 5 months. Tennessee, Clemson, Notre Dame, Michigan. So he's definitely already kind of one of those coveted interior offensive line prospects. I think Rivals has him at number 2 right now in the country. To be honest with you, and I'm not talking about, physical evaluation, but just in the personality evaluation of me talking to the kid for the first time, he kind of reminded me of Solomon Thomas, actually, when I first talked to Solomon. He's very intelligent. When you first speak to him, he's very confident in what he wants to do. He actually said that he wanted to do sports communication, sports media, some of the stuff that we do on a daily basis. And, basically he said that Florida State had been a dream school of his. And I know there are some people that when they hear the dream school comment, they throw up a red flag, but he seemed very genuine. And he seemed just confident in who he was as a person and a prospect. And I think he's definitely a guy that Florida State fans can look at and be potentially excited about over the next couple of months.
Yeah, and my only question with him is size. How big can he get? He's listed at 6'3", 275.
Yeah.
I think would have to be soaking wet to be 275. But listen, he's got 2 years to go in high school, so he'll grow, and he may get a couple inches taller. Just so you know, he's been talking to Ohio State, Michigan, Tennessee, Penn State, and Clemson. He has also been on unofficial visits to Tennessee, Penn State, and Clemson that we are aware of. So, but he was a fun kid to watch. Seems like a nice kid, as you said, Nick. And then another offensive lineman, again, I think the same thing is how big he can get Sean Perlott. He did get an FSU offer earlier, I believe, at one of the camps in June. I think it's more of a wait and see how he grows type of thing. But he was impressive too. He's got outstanding feet, so we'll see where that goes. Obviously, there were some other guys on campus, guys. A guy that really impressed me both on the field and off was Samari Matthews, a cornerback from Cornelius, North Carolina. He participated in camp on Saturday. I will get it out. And was at practice on Sunday. Listen, he brought his parents. That was the big deal. They had not been down here. Samari had been down here at least when he was a freshman. He may have been here back since then. But he said his parents loved it when asked about their experience in Tallahassee. He also mentioned South Carolina, Clemson, and Tennessee along with FSU as being his top schools. And my report says senior year, but it should be junior year. If you read my report, I apologize. I did not catch my did you get a chance to watch Samari at all, Nick?
No, I didn't. He must have missed him along the way, but whenever the family comes and they enjoy it, that's obviously a good sign. So there are a couple. You said he was from South Carolina?
Yep.
Yeah, Jazavian Curran's another South Carolina prospect who Florida State's very high on, and he likes Florida State as well. He did end up making it on to the camp as well. So a couple of good South Carolinian defensive backs come through this weekend.
Yeah, and Kearns has been on campus twice since he was offered by FSU in early May. So you know the effort to get here and the interest is real when you're doing that. That's not a short trip. I've taken that trip many times from Tallahassee to Columbia, South Carolina, and you got to go an hour north before you get to Rock Hill. All right, we had a couple of FSU legacies that may figure into the 2026 recruiting class. Corbin Fordham, the tight end, the four-star tight end from Bowles High School in Jacksonville. His father is Todd Fordham, a former All-ACC offensive lineman from Florida State. Listen, I know for a fact, the legacy part is not going to be what impacts his recruiting. His father has told him that, this is your life. You got to do this. You got to go where you're wanting. And, of course, Florida State didn't recruit his brother, who's a starting linebacker at NC State, which is still weird. So I don't think that'll have any bearing on Florida State other than the fact that NC State will be one of the teams that Florida State is competing against for Corbin. He's tremendously athletic, 6'4", 210, still growing into his body. If you've seen his father's about 6'6", and played in the NFL for 13 years, so he's got some bloodlines, and obviously he's got two brothers that play scholarship football, one at NC State, one at Louisiana Lafayette, I believe. But it's going to look like it's going to be FSU, Ohio State, Georgia, Auburn, and NC State. He does have a top 10, but those were the 5 schools when we asked him, where do you want to go watch games this year? Where do you expect to take unofficial visits? That's where it is. Fish, I'm sure you've had a chance to watch Corbin. What are your thoughts on Corbin?
Yeah, he's definitely one of the better players at his position. I like him. I think he has the potential to be one of the better players also in the state of Florida. His brothers weren't – I remember his brothers coming out. They weren't as highly regarded. I think this kid has a chance to be one of the top guys, like I said, at his position, at the tight end position. So I think they're going to recruit him. I definitely think he's a recruitable player. So
yeah. I would be surprised if they didn't take him if they could get him. We'll see what happens. But obviously, hopefully having that connection to Tallahassee will help Florida State. But he was unbelievably impressive at the Rivals camp. And again, I know we're talking about shorts and no helmets and no pads. But, Nick, you saw him. You thought he was impressive. He's got great speed, good hands, competes his ass off, kind of like his dad.
Yeah.
His dad was a tough guy. And I think that – and, listen, he likes that he started mentioning about how Mike got on to him about not being with the tight ends during a certain portion of practice on Sunday, and he kind of takes to that hardcore coaching. So hopefully that'll be a relationship that continues to build. And he said that's exactly why he was at Florida State, was to build that relationship with his staff, and was very complimentary of Chris Thompson as well. The other legacy, same situation. Michael Ionata is the younger brother of Joseph Ionata, who was recruited by Florida State, ultimately ended up at Alabama for reasons that really I can't understand. I think Florida State had a shot to get him. Now, listen, this is another family that I know. I know that Michael's recruitment will be independent of Joseph's, but FSU is involved with UCF, Florida, Georgia, and Alabama. Those are the schools that he wants to go to this fall for unofficial visits. Have you seen Fish? What are your thoughts? And Michael did not work out his 2 days from camp. His father didn't want him working out going into camp on Monday, so he wanted him fresh for his high school team. What were your thoughts? What were your thoughts of Michael Ionata?
Yeah, I definitely he has more upside just because of the size. I think that was the one thing that hurt his brother was he wasn't a real big kid. I think that they will recruit this. They will recruit this brother a little harder. I agreed with you. I thought they should have taken his brother, and hopefully it doesn't hurt them with this kid because you never know. If people could say, "Oh, they're independent of each other," but if Alabama comes calling and his brother's already there, you got to wonder if they'll land him as well.
All right. Then we're going to wrap it up because I know we all got things to do from early today's practice. And Fish, I know you got a football practice to go to. Amari Clemens was on campus, the running back from Marianna, Florida. Got offered by Florida State earlier this year. Very impressive film. If you haven't seen it, go to Huddle, watch it. You're going to love it. He was on practice on Friday. Now, Nick, I don't recall seeing him on Saturday. Did you see him on Saturday at camp?
I didn't. I thought he left Friday afternoon was the plan.
Yeah, I think he did too. There are only 3 running backs that were at camp this particular Saturday. But listen, it looks like it's going to be a battle between the 3 biggies in the state of Florida and Auburn based on what he said. He mentioned that Florida State, Miami, Florida, and Auburn were his favorites. It says he plans to visit all 4 of these schools to watch a game this year. Fish, I don't know if you got a chance to watch him. I'm pretty sure you have. He's an impressive-looking kid.
He's the real deal. I mean, his film's really good. You never know about the area he plays in, but I always say if you're good, you dominate the competition. His film, it looks like he's dominating guys, pulling away from them. He looks like a player that is going to be pretty darn good at the next level.
Yeah, he does. He's fun to watch. I know you've seen him before, Nick. And what were your impressions of Amari?
Yeah, I think he was at the elite camp earlier in the summer as well, and he was kind of one of those running backs that was sticking out. He's got good film, great speed, and obviously the battle with him being down there is you're going to have to fight off Miami, which I'm sure is going to go straight on after him. So good-looking prospect, certainly one to look at in terms of the 2026 running backs that Florida State may go after.
Yeah, and listen, there were a lot of other kids that we could sit here and talk about. Evan Goodwin, Zion Legree, Ellis McGaskin was on campus. So we just don't have enough time in the day to cover it all. But listen, Fish, I know you got to go. Nick, thanks for joining us as always.
Hold on 1 second, Pat. Something that happened while we were live. Ladarian Clarity has postponed his commitment to an undisclosed date. He was supposed to commit on August 3rd. So we were talking about him earlier. That was supposed to come up in a couple of days. So it looks like he needs a little bit more time, which I don't know how you would read into that. But
can't hurt.
Can't
hurt.
No, especially if Ole Miss is leading. That means somebody's giving him a reason to rethink his list and what order they're in. And listen, I said it the other day. I do believe that these things are coming down to negotiations, and I think these kids are smartly, business savvy, leveraging their NIL packages against one another. And I'm not saying that's what's happening here. I think sometimes kids just need to clear their head. He's probably got a lot of people talking to him, a lot of people in his ear. But listen, I'm pulling for Florida State. I mean, this is a kid that I thought it was a no-brainer once he got the offer. And then kind of like Max Buchanan, the more he blew up, the more offers he got, the more he got interested in possibly going somewhere else. And we'll see what happens with that. But yeah, that's good stuff. All right. Well, guys, obviously we have, if you're watching or listening, whether it's live or taped, if you go to theosceola.com or floridastate.rivals.com, you have to be a subscriber to get the Fish's Baker's Dozen. We also have stories on Solomon Thomas, Josh Petty, Darius Gray, We will have more from Amari and Michael Ionata and Corbin Fordham later this week. Their full interviews, they're actually up there on video on my YouTube page, which you're not going to find me on YouTube, but they're up there. If you go to YouTube and search Corbin Fordham. But yeah, we'd prefer you go to the Osceola, Osceola.com or FloridaState.rivals.com. Please check us out. We think you'll enjoy the recruiting coverage. And then, of course, if you don't subscribe to our YouTube channel, please hit the subscribe button and also hit the notification button so that you get notified when we publish a tape show or when we're getting to get ready to go live. Right now, our schedule is live at 6 p.m. for either recruiting or football. And then this is a special show. Usually we'll go live on Wednesdays and Thursdays at 3 o'clock with Seminole Sidelines. We have not decided whether we're going to make Reeling Them In a segment once we get to the season, but Reeling Them In is not really a scheduled program because it requires Fish and I and Nick to all be on the same schedule. And obviously Fish is at high schools on a regular basis down in South Florida, and that is a recruiting heaven. So if you're interested in recruiting, I would highly suggest you follow our coverage because nobody else has a Fish on their staff. And Fish works his ass off. It's very good. He owns a company called Elite Scouting Services, and he sells his recruiting packages to colleges all over the United States. So he's a guy that college head coaches pay attention to, and you should too. So come to theosceola.com, and then Nick and I'll try to win over your trust as we go. So that's the way it rolls.
Like I said, working on the recruiting legend tagline.
That's right. Well,
we're always working on it.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, hey, we appreciate you watching, listen, whatever, however you got this information, and Nick and Fish certainly appreciate it. But we will be back tomorrow with the Seminole Sidelines at 3 o'clock to kind of wrap up the first 6 days of Florida State preseason camp 2024, which they went in full pads today, and I didn't get to stay around long after practice, but look forward to hearing what all the guys think tomorrow when we get together for a what do they call that? When you have when a lot of people talk at the round table. We get to a round table for FSU football for the first 6 days of practice. All right, guys, y'all have a great one. Thanks for joining us.